Okay, so this is part 2 of my game room tour, and I'm going to look at my HDTV gaming setup today. So, let's start off with the TV. This is your basic LG 4K TV. It's not OLED. I don't really have anything that would necessitate that, but right now what you're looking at is the PolyMega screensaver. It's just kind of floating by covers when it's idle. So let's take a look at the consoles. Okay, so first console is not actually a console. This is my MiSTer, and I've got various dongles for controllers. I've got I'm actually using the SNES Classic. That will focus. Using the SNES Classic 8-bit DOE 2.4 gigahertz controller, and the dongle is a classic controller style. So to get around that, I use this dongle. It's by a company called RAFnet, and I plug in the 8-bit DOE dongle, and it converts it to a USB signal. And I could also use this for the NES Classic controller, and it works great. There are no 8-bit DOE 2.4 gigahertz controllers that have USB, and I just love the form factor and the feel of this so much that I just went and bought that adapter for it. I could also use it for the NES Classic controller because the dongle is also 2.4 gigahertz, or is also Wii Classic controller style. And I'm also using an 8-bit DOE Pro 2. And this is great because the analog function is recognized for the PlayStation core. And other than that, the form factor is the same as an NES controller, or SNES controller, so it works great. And it's wired. It's a 10-foot long cable, so it's got plenty of length for where I sit. Also using the 8-bit DOE 2.4 gigahertz M30. And this is a fantastic controller because this is great for not only Genesis games, but also arcade games, and I use it for the PC Engine games. So this is my primary controller that I use most of the time. And I've got a little charging adapter here, so I can just kind of snap it onto a charger and not have to worry about messing up the USB port. And here is their PC Engine version, 8-bit DOE 2.4 gigahertz PC Engine controller. Now, they released this when the Analog Duo was announced, and they said that the Analog Duo would not require a dongle for these. Of course, then COVID hit, and there's still no Analog Duo. And this one is actually for the PC Engine Mini, but the ones for the Analog Duo are basically identical. And so you can see an array of dongles, and yeah, I've got this nice acrylic case. I wanted the aluminum case, but that one was sold out forever, and so I bought this one from a UK website, and it's a clear acrylic. I think it looks really nice, and especially when you turn it on and all the lights go off and the beeps and boops. So it's got a nice look to it. I actually ordered a second case for my second MiSTer setup that I'm currently building. So that's the top shelf. The second shelf, there's my Switch. I pretty much never use it handheld. I'm just not a big handheld gamer, so it's permanently docked, and I use a couple of Bluetooth controllers for that, the NES, the Switch Pro controller. Here's my analog NT Mini Noir, the new one. It's got slots for both Famicom and NES, and it's region free, and it's 1080p, and all that good stuff. So, kind of a more elaborate NES. It's more NES than anyone really needs. But I also have the AVS, the retro USB AVS, which is 720p, and that works great as well. I kind of swap them out. you know, depending on which one I want out. They both were great. Here's my GameCube, and I've got the GC loader installed. You can't really see that because there's the mounting tray inside there, but turn that on and take a look. And I've got Swiss loaded on here, and that's what allows me to utilize the GC loader and all the games that are on there. I'm not a huge Switch collector. I had a bunch of games at one point in time, and you know, I bought games when everyone else bought games, when they were really cheap at, you know, a couple bucks at thrift stores. And I realized I just never play the GameCube. I really only play F-Zero and Mario Kart. And so I just ended up selling my entire GameCube collection because they were just taking up space. I never used it. And then once I got the GC loader, it was kind of a no-brainer for me. The Switch is not nostalgic for me. I don't really have any strong feelings towards it, so I figured, why not? And I also sold my GameCube component cables for a nice chunk of change too, because again, I didn't need it. The Prism, the substitute component cables came out for the GameCube, and I bought those. And so they do the job just fine. I'm not ultra picky about my GameCube. Here's my Dreamcast. The Dreamcast is, it's got the whatchamacallit, the loader, the Dream, or whatever, I forgot the name was called, but switch the inputs here. Here it is. I don't have the controller plugged in right now, but basically it's lets me play all the Dreamcast games. Again, not a huge Dreamcast person. I had a bunch of Dreamcast games, but again, I sold most of them because I realized I only played the shooters. So I have an original Dreamcast, but you know, it's kind of low tier. Oh, one thing to point out. So I have a SCART switch that will switch between the 31 and the 15 kilohertz, and this is so that we can play 480p progressive scan through the SCART switch and then into the RetroTink 5X, and it looks great. And then there's some games that are not compatible with progressive scan, and so you just kind of hit this little switch, go back to 15 kilohertz, like Bangai-O, and just kind of switch back and forth as you need to. That's pretty convenient. And that's one of the things about the Dreamcast, is that it was ahead of its time. It had those different display options, but most people back in the day only used, you know, composite, the yellow cable, which was not great for 480i. But now there's all sorts of things like HDMI Dreamcast boards you can put in. I don't have that because Dreamcast is, you know, it's not my favorite. I didn't really want to invest that much into it. Here is my This Is Cool Saturn, and this one is unmodded. This is stock, except that I have the satiator installed in the back. And so I've loaded all my games and put them into folders, and I can find quickly whatever I want. So the satiator is great because it still allows for the disk drive functionality. You can still play real games on it. Or if you don't want to mess with the discs, you don't want to take them out, you can just turn it on and hop right into the menu and play off of this. So I know it's a little more pricey, the satiator is, than the Fenrir and all those other options. But with the Saturn, I went through almost all of them. I started with the RIA, which was the first one, and that one was it was okay. But the problem was it had a very specific file format, CCD. Like, and I'm a Mac user. I don't have a PC, so there weren't as many options for me to rip the games in that format. So it was just like a big pain. And then I got the mode. Oh, that's what's in here. Yeah, I moved my mode into the Dreamcast for the games. But anyways, for the Saturn, so I used the mode for the Saturn, and that was great, but I had to take out the disk drive. So when I got the satiator, I said that's the solution I want. So I went ahead and installed the satiator, and then to move the mode over to the Dreamcast, and so now we're good. Okay, down here, this is my PolyMega. Now, I was one of the very, very early pre-orders for this. When I ordered the PolyMega base system, it was $299, and I think the modules were like 60 bucks each. And I got mine really early because I was pre-approved to get it an early shipment because my blog. And so I wrote up a couple of reviews about it. And so I've had this for quite a while, a lot longer than most people have had. The thing about the PolyMega is that right now you see that this is the NES module. So it's got the slot for games. So when you want to install your games, you just pop the NES carts in there. And then the other modules, there's the Genesis module. There's PC Engine TurboGrafx. Now, the thing I like about this is that it's got PC Engine controller ports, which are way easier to find PC Engine controllers than TurboGrafx controllers. So that makes sense. And then the SNES module. They did, and then when this came shipped, right now what you're looking at is the NES module. There was a blank module which didn't have any ports, and that was what the base system came with. And the controller port for the base system is USB down here, and here's, you can see the disk slot. The USB controller ports they're just okay. They're regular USB, but it's because the system is emulation. You know, the input latency, there's a base level of input latency involved with emulation, and so the USB ports are not great to use if you're playing games that are relying on quick twitch movements like shooters or fighters. So what's better is to use the controller ports on the actual element modules, because these are low latency controller ports and they're significantly faster. The response is much, much faster than the USB. So what I do normally is I have my 8BitDo 2.4 gigahertz dongle and controller. And I know I showed you the other one. I have a lot of these because this is my favorite, and they're relatively cheap too. So I just use this when I'm playing shooters on the system, and it's much, much, much better. It's still, you know, depending on who you are, you might be able to notice it. I notice it. Some people might, but probably most won't. I'm not going to hold that against PolyMega. They kind of just, they did what they had to do. And overall, it's a good product. It's got a lot of features, and here I can actually turn it on and mess around and show you. Let me back up here. So this is your base screen, your home screen, and I have my consoles sorted, and all my games are sorted by console. Originally, the different regions would all have their own individual thumbnail, but I chose the option to collapse them all into one so there weren't so many of them. So these are my PC Engine games. And you click on any one of them, you get a detailed information screen. So very similar to Raspberry Pi, RetroPie setups, where with the metadata is all included. You can rank the games here. There's a bunch of screenshots you can scroll through, get an idea of the game. So those are just my Hue cards. And then CD games. Same thing. Now the CD games take a lot longer to install. The disk drive, I don't know what it is, if it's a 2x, but it's not very fast. It's one of those things where you pop it in, you hit import, and then you go and get yourself a drink and a snack and come back, you know, like 15 minutes later. Each one of these took that long to import, so it was a little bit of a pain. I know that the company, the PlayMagi, who makes the PolyMega, they didn't really want to support piracy, but you could, if you could figure out how to burn games onto CD, you could import them into the PolyMega, and it's gonna still think that it's, you know, a legit game. So, but carts, and same thing with repro. A lot of repro carts will work depending if people did or did not mess with the headers on the carts. So you know, food for thought. Here are my Saturn games. We've got 116 Saturn games imported, and this took forever. This was like weeks long, just kind of popping down, checking up on it and making sure these all ripped. And initially, when they first came out, there were a lot of bugs in the ripping process. Some games would make it all the way to like 81% and then just not progress any further. So that was a pain in the ass. They fixed that though since with a lot of updates. And that's the thing too, the update support is fantastic for the PolyMega. They really are continuously plugging away and making sure, you know, that everything is as good as it can be, and they keep improving it. My Genesis collection is my largest collection. Of course, we got Mega Drive games mixed in here, like right here. We have Lancer, which is the Mega Drive game. It's one of my favorite shooters. And, you know, we keep going. The graphics are obviously taken straight from the cover, but they've been touched up a bit, as you can tell. Maybe the placement of the title has been moved to make it more in line with the space available for the thumbnail. They did a good job. So, and the big selling point for me, this is something I probably wasn't really interested in getting until I found out that at the last minute they added Saturn. And so when I heard that they were going to be able to emulate the Saturn, I was a little skeptical because Saturn emulation was kind of wonky, wasn't quite there. But the licensed Saturn emulator is fantastic. It's phenomenal. I haven't seen any problems with it at all. And I've used also the Saturn emulator on my Mac, and you know that's fine too. That's good, but it's just so convenient to have everything imported, all of my collection imported here and available. So that's the PolyMega. Down to the last row here, got my Mega SG analog FPGA Sega Genesis, if that focuses. And of course it came with, available to buy was also an 8-bit 4 or 2.4 8-bit DOE M30. Fantastic controller. And then the Super NT right next to it, as it should be, right? They're battling it out. And another 8-bit DOE controller. Here's my HDMI switch. It's 8 ports from Monoprice. It's a good switch. It's not the best, but at the time, this was the only one I could find that had 8 inputs for it. It's technically automatic, but it tends to favor this one channel pretty much all the time, which is not a big deal because I can just manually hit the switch, you know, and go back and forth as I need to. I have a remote for it as well, but how many remotes do you really want sitting around your chair? So it's usually not a big deal for me to go and press that button. I've got a sound bar here. It's a JBL. My brother-in-law got it for me for Christmas a couple years back. Sounds great. And I almost exclusively use the sound bar. I run an optical cable from the back of the TV. That's the RetroTink 5X. And to be honest, the reason why I got the RetroTink 5X was for its awesome de-interlacing capabilities. Because prior to this, I had an OSSC, and that was fantastic. But it didn't look well with 480i interlaced content. It kind of sucked. So I bought one of these, and this was more than twice the price. And I used it, and it was great. But you know, I find myself not playing interlaced content on this TV at all anymore. So this is a little, I don't know if it's necessary anymore. The only component source I hooked up to it right now is my Gamecube. And, you know, and I barely play that. So I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep it in the chain. What you're looking at here is actually a very, very simplified setup. I just pulled out a bunch of consoles out of here. This was actually more cramped and jammed. And, you know, I had a PlayStation, original PS1 in here. I had a PC Engine Duo in here that I pulled because, frankly, between the PolyMega and the MiSTer, I don't really need it up here. I have that on my other TV. And also a PS2 I pulled out here. And I kind of want to streamline the look. I'm slowly phasing out the CRT-centric consoles because I have a CRT already. Like the Saturn, I don't really need the Saturn on there. I know I can play the Saturn on the PolyMega, but probably the clincher will be once the Saturn core gets released for the MiSTer, I'm probably just going to yank the Saturn and just kind of spread things out a little bit more and focus more on appearance and aesthetics in the setup. Now, being a new TV, of course, I've got a PS4. You know, I play it occasionally. I've also got a PS3, which is kind of hard to see, but it's right here. Which I almost never use. It's currently not hooked up in the chain for the HDMI because I have 9 HDMI sources, but only 8 ports. So when I do want to play it, it's no big deal. I just plug it in and unplug something else for the time being. So, yeah, that's my HDMI gaming setup. And let me know if you have any questions.